Hello, everybody. It is just wonderful to be in your presence and to talk about people and how they fit into the issues that we've been talking about. I have been here since the time that the governor was speaking, and I was just delighted to hear him talk about how California is going to lead the way in terms of demonstrating what it is to have an inclusive economy. I love the next speaker who talked about catalysts and how when we're doing what it is that we have to do in terms of producing what we need, creating the services that we need, we have to think of being catalysts for the things that are absolutely essential. We're at an amazing moment in which we have an extraordinary future in front of us, but we have to be able to address the things that could hold us back at the same time that we're trying to take advantage of what could be. We understand that the planet is in peril, and we have a real role to play to make sure that the planet will thrive and the people on it will thrive. But we also know that we're facing inequality. And it's not just inequality, it's toxic inequality. It's hollowing out the middle class, baking in poverty, making economic mobility almost unheard of. We can't thrive with that toxic inequality just swirling around. At the same time, our demographics are changing. You know it, you hear it, you read about it. You've probably heard the figure that by 2044, the majority of people in the United States of America will be of color. What you may not know is that earlier than 2044, amazing changes have happened. This slide shows you what's happened between 1980 and 2050. The gray bar represents people who are white, so you can see what's happening. What we often don't know is that since the summer of 2012, the majority of all babies born in this country have been of color, that by 2030, the majority of the young workforce will be of color. In California, over 73% of all children under 18 are already of color. In the United States of America, within 6 months of today, the majority of all children in this country will be of color. And when we think about going forward, this is what it looks like as times change. The orange bar shows you the contributions to growth from people of color. The gray bar is the contributions to growth from people who are white. The bottom part shows from 2010 to 2050. You see what's happening. What we have to do is that we have to have a strategy that makes sure that the people who are going to be the future are ready to make that future the bright one that we all hope it will be. The sad truth is, perhaps it's sad, could be good news. I'm going to say the sad truth is that the future of the nation is dependent on the very people we have been leaving behind as a nation. It is sad that we have been leaving them behind, but we can do something about it. We can make sure that we are building a society that is driven by equity, just and fair inclusion into a society in which all can participate, prosper, and reach their full potential. And we can't do it if we're not willing to look at who's being left behind and how we got this way. I wish that we could just use the words inclusive economy and make it so. But if we don't think about people who are Black, why it is that they're concentrated in neighborhoods without good schools, without access to health care, without access to fresh fruits and vegetables. People don't just choose to live in those communities. We have had policies, public and private ones, that have forced people into those communities, and then we have pulled out all the things that make for healthy living. It's not just that people who are Latino want to go to schools that aren't servicing them, want to work 2 and 3 jobs and barely make it. We actually have had policies and strategies that have forced people into those circumstances. We need to look at who they are. We need to look at the history. We need to understand what we have done as a nation, because it's only with that kind of deliberate education of ourselves and commitment to do something about it, and searching for the strategies that will make a difference, that we can unleash the power and the promise that is here in this nation. Because these shifting demographics are a gift. Because the median age for people who are white in America is 42. The median age for people who are Latino, The fastest growing among the groups of poverty is about 28. And so we are still a young nation, even as much of the rest of the world is wringing its hands, countries in Europe, around what to do about their aging population. It is a gift. When you think about entrepreneurial spirit and activity, it is so amazing to think about people who are Asian, Latino, African American. They are more likely to start small businesses than people who are white. And the challenge of raising a family, of building community, all of those things, they spur innovation. And so we have all of that, but we're not investing in it. We're not lifting it up. We're not making sure that we can take advantage of it. If you think about it, we are becoming a world nation. And what could be more powerful in a global economy than to have a population that is linked to the world through language, through kinship, through custom? We have what we need. As a matter of fact, two things that are important have now converged. Being able to produce, achieve equity, and have everyone reach their full potential is a moral agenda. There's a moral imperative to do that. It is immoral to continue to leave people behind because of their language, their color, their race, their origins, their religion. It is immoral to do that. To invest is a moral imperative. But we also have an economic imperative. We also have a democratic imperative. We cannot be proud of democracy on the world stage if it is not a democracy that works within the context of inclusion. And so we have gotten to the point that achieving equity is an economic imperative, and therefore equity is the superior growth model for the nation. We get the equity agenda right, we get the environmental agenda right, we get the economic agenda right. It is extraordinary that we could be at this point, but it will take real resolve to focus on it. Too many of us think that when they hear me and others talk about equity, that I am suggesting sacrifice. People fear that equity is a zero-sum game. Well, it's just not true. In fact, the opposite is true. I have struggled mightily to think of a way to talk about equity being a superior growth model and not a zero-sum game in ways that people can grasp what it is that I'm trying to say. And it dawned on me one day that it's like the curb cuts in the sidewalk. You know those curb cuts that are there in the sidewalk? They are there at the corner, the yellow. They are there because of the advocacy of people with disabilities in wheelchairs. People with disabilities were gaining rights, but those rights were hollow if people couldn't maneuver in their communities and take advantage of jobs and other things that they wanted to do. But how many times have you been pushing a stroller and been so glad you didn't have to pick that contraption up and you could just smoothly go from corner to corner? How many times have workers had their load lightened because of carts they were pulling or pushing, and they could do it smoothly because of those curb cuts? How many times have you been able to let your shoulders go down because your new 8-year-old bike rider was able to traverse the neighborhood sidewalk to sidewalk without riding in the street? We even saved lives because of those curb cuts. Study after study has shown that 9 out of 10 unencumbered adults cross the street at the corner because of those curb cuts. I call it the curb cut effect. You solve a problem with nuance and specificity for the most vulnerable, and the benefits cascade out. It's just the opposite of the trickle-down notion so many of us hold on to, where you start with those who have the most and the benefits trickle down. The truth of the matter is, if you solve problems with specificity and nuance for the most vulnerable, the benefits cascade out. Take seatbelts. They are there because of advocacy for children. But look at all of the people whose lives have been saved because of seatbelts. Not smoking in public places. It started because of advocacy of flight attendants on airplanes who were more exposed to smoke there than anyone else. And look what has happened in terms of not smoking in public places. Once you know what you're looking for, you can find it every place. And it's certainly there in terms of the people who were being left behind. People who were black, people who are Latino, people who are Hmong, people who are Native American, who are the most vulnerable in an economy that has not counted them as important, in a nation that has not invested in them as if they are the most valuable resource, which they absolutely are. We do it because it's the moral thing to do. We do it because it's an economic imperative. We do it because it is the only way forward. It is time to stop being nostalgic for a time that never was. When people talk about when America was great, think about who might not agree with you. A time when lynching was running rampant, was that great? When we think about a time when America was great, is that a time when children who were Latino and others were out in the fields, not even in school? That was not great. We need to stop being nostalgic for a time that never was and start accepting a future that is inevitable and investing in it and making sure that equity is our driver. Thank you.
Your podcast.
If you would like to know more about what I've said, the name of the podcast is Radical Imagination.
Give it up for Angela.